Walters is your spot for every football game the rest of the way, whether it's the newly expanded college football playoff or the NFL postseason. Walters has over 30 TVs, both inside and outside, located across the street from Nationals Park.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
With the second overall pick in the 2025 MLB Draft, the Los Angeles Angels, which makes the number 1 overall pick, the Washington Nationals.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Thursday, December 12th, 2024. Along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. MLB's 2024 winter meetings are over. This year happened in Dallas, happened from Sunday through Wednesday. And while this year's winter meetings did not include a major move by the Nats, this year's winter meetings did include a major happening for the Nats. They on Tuesday evening won the draft lottery for the 2025 MLB Draft. The Nats now have the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 MLB Draft. A tremendous development for the Nats. We don't know if the Nats are going to spend significant money this offseason, but the team at least just got the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 MLB Draft. It is great to have you with us. Happy holidays. We have a lot to discuss, including, yes, a certain former Nats outfielder, Juan Soto, signing with the New York Mets, and the Nats' shocking decision to non-tender reliever Kyle Finnegan. But Mark, as you know, the Nats actually won the draft lottery for the 2024 MLB Draft, but were ineligible to get that number 1 overall pick. So them winning that draft lottery did not count. But the Nats on Tuesday evening, if you think about it, won the draft lottery for a second consecutive year. The Nats have somehow cracked the code on winning these MLB draft lotteries.
And this is only the third one that's ever been held. It just started in 2022. And if you remember that year, they had the best odds or tied for the best odds that year and wound up not winning it, but getting the number 2 pick, which they used on Dylan Cruz, who most people agreed would be worthy of a number 1 pick almost any year other than the one where Paul Skeens was available. And so in this bizarre way, you could argue that 3 straight years they were in a position to maybe get the best player in the draft. Now, Mike Rizzo would tell you he hopes he's never in this position again. I think a lot of us would hope they're not in that position again, but this one was a surprise. I didn't go into it. I don't think they really went into it seriously thinking about it. They had a 10% chance. They were the 4th best odds of everyone. And as the cards kept getting turned and you saw other teams' logos, and you said, well, hang on a second, they're right in this thing down to the wire. And it was them and the Angels. And maybe a little payback for losing Anthony Rendon to Anaheim, and the Nats instead get the number 1 pick of the 2025 draft. And while that's not something that the impact is going to be felt for a while, it's a good burst of good news for, I think, a team that needed some good news right now with given everything else that's happened so far this offseason.
Well, especially off the Juan Soto news, which just brought everyone back to Soto being traded and why was he traded and why are the Nats where they are and are they going to spend money? Them winning that draft lottery on Tuesday evening was like an injection of positivity. It was like an infusion of optimism. And I feel like the Nats fan base very much needed that. Big City Matt Adams representing the Nats at that lottery and bringing some good luck for the Nats. Way to go, Big City. A big good luck charm is Big City.
Here's the bizarre part of it all. Those guys who are representing the teams out there, they had nothing to do with anything. The ping pong balls are drawn like an hour earlier in a closed room in front of a few witnesses, and then they just unveil them on the TV set there, and somebody represents each team. Matt Adams, at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, is roaming the halls of the Hilton Anatole in Dallas. He's looking for work. He wants to get into the business, coaching perhaps, after retiring officially last year. And somebody with the national season, I think Mike Rizzo, and said, hey, do you want to represent us? We need somebody to sit at the table for us. And he's like, sure. The next thing you know, he's front and center on camera celebrating the draft lottery. Who knows? Maybe this will help get Big City a job, whether with the Nats or somebody else who wants him to be their good luck charm now.
How do you ignore him? How do you put aside what he just accomplished here for the Nats? We always enjoy hearing from you. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. And we have a website that we invite you to check out, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. So, like I said, a lot that we want to get to here on this installment of the podcast. We're doing episodes during the offseason every so often, as developments suggest. Unfortunately, we really haven't had any major Nationals developments to warrant like an emergency installment of the podcast. Perhaps one of those is coming. But there is, of course, an overarching question with the Nats right now, and that is, are they going to spend? This is the time to spend. I think we all agree on that. Mike Rizzo has been pretty blunt that he believes that now is the time for them to do something. If you saw him on MLB Network's MLB Tonight on Tuesday afternoon, he said now is the time to hit the gas.
We feel good about where we're at, but we have to keep moving forward. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, but now's not the time to hit the brakes, just to hit the gas.
Which I thought was pretty notable that he would come out and say something like that. You wonder if he was talking as much to his bosses as he was talking to the rest of us. But I guess let's start off like this. That the Nats have yet to do anything significant. Does that communicate to you that they are unlikely to do anything significant? Because to me, the way I'm looking at this is maybe they're not going to spend, but I think it's too early in the offseason to panic just yet. We know how these MLB offseasons are. I think everyone needs to take a deep breath. Yes, some major moves have happened, but we know how things go. It's not until sometimes January, even February, that some of the big names come off the board. So I do feel like we need to calm down a little bit, but how are you viewing everything right now?
I agree with you on that. I get the frustration. Look, I'm frustrated as a reporter. I want stuff to happen. It's no fun sitting around all day, every day, waiting to see, well, have they done anything? Is their name coming up in anything at all? And it hasn't yet. But I think what's important to note here is if a whole lot of other prominent free agents had gone off the board this week and the Nats weren't involved in any of those discussions, then you're getting, I think, legitimately concerned. Outside of Soto, outside of Max Fried, there have been a few other moves, but not really a whole lot yet. So the Nats are certainly not alone in not making any moves of real consequence yet. So I'm not ruling anything out. I think we've outlined all the reasons why this should be an offseason for them to spend in a way that they have not in recent off seasons. I think clearly Mike Rizzo, that's his preference and what he believes they should be doing. But as you said, we don't really know yet if they're going to, because that's an ownership question. And it has kind of vaguely been brought up in the past, but nothing real concrete. And I think, to me, I think there's still an opportunity, and I want to deep down believe that they are going to be doing more than they've done the past few off seasons. But the one thing I wish to this point we had gotten was some kind of indication of their name being bandied about with some prominent free agents. Whether they ever had a chance of re-signing Juan Soto or not, it would have been nice to at least hear that they met with him or that they put in an offer just to suggest that they were involved in that and that they're serious again about this. I did see one report on Wednesday about them being one of the suitors for Christian Walker. I hope that's true. He is absolutely a name they should be going after at first base. But I really haven't heard their name come up much else. That doesn't mean they're not involved. We know sometimes Rizzo can play his cards very close to the vest, and all of a sudden out of the blue, they make a move. But I would think, if nothing else from a PR standpoint, you would like to hear their name bandied about more. And it feels to me like the vast majority of any discussion that went on at the winter meetings was about 5 or 6 big market clubs in New York, LA, Boston, Toronto, things like that. And you really didn't hear much about the Nationals at all.
You didn't. And I've thought a lot about the Nats not coming up in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. And I'm really of two minds on this. And a lot of this is, what is the truth here? So were they not in this because Mike Rizzo has been given a paltry budget with which to work? Or were they not in this because Mike Rizzo didn't want to play the reindeer games of Scott Boras? You know, it was known for a while that Soto was going to get a gargantuan deal. Now, did we know 15 for 765? Maybe not, but we knew that a massive deal was coming. And I wonder if, from Mike Rizzo's perspective, if he might have said, we're not going to do that. We don't believe in doing that. We don't want to be used as a pawn in Scott Boras's game. And so rather than offer what we would be comfortable offering, maybe, I don't know, 500 million, even 600 million, we're not going to get embarrassed like that. We're going to sit this one out and we're going to focus on deploying our resources on other more practical signees. If that's the case, then I actually can respect that. We don't know if that's the case, though. See, and that's the thing. And I think that's the problem with a lot of this. There's a lot that we don't know. We had a conversation on the podcast in, I believe, September, where we talked about what is Mike Rizzo going to be allowed to do by ownership this offseason. We, of course, still don't have a true answer to that question. We'll hopefully get that answer in the coming months. But I think there are a variety of ways that this can be. It can be that Mike Rizzo right now is handcuffed and frustrated and is not being allowed to do anything. It also can be that Mike Rizzo is taking a very measured, strategic, and tactical approach to free agency. And instead of just going bonkers, is trying to do what he feels like is in the best long-term interests of the club. If that's the case, then I applaud him. If that's not the case, then we have some problems. But specific to Soto, I do wonder if there was Rizzo saying, we're not going to dance this dance with Boras as much as it was Rizzo not being allowed to dance any dance with Boras.
It's entirely possible that that was the truth. And is it even worth it to put your name out there for something that you know deep down has no chance of happening? No, maybe not. So that's fine. I think what we're really getting at here, though, is we need some tangible evidence of what it is they're trying to do. And the only way it's going to happen is either, number one, actually signing someone of consequence, and now we'll know that they were, or short of that, being involved in discussions enough that your name comes up and you say, okay, they were one of 3 serious contenders for free agent X or whatever that would be. So I think that's that next stage that we're all sitting around waiting to see. Now, deep down, I still feel like they are going to be involved. And I think there's 3 potential levels that they could approach this offseason the rest of the way. Number one would be the all-in approach. That would be, we're going after Soto, we're going after Fried, we're going after Burns, Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, the top guys, the guys who are going to get 9-figure contracts. And that would be a huge departure from what they've done in recent years, but it would be what they did, a decade ago when they were trying to win a World Series. The second level, and I think this is the one to really watch because I think it's the more plausible approach to it, would be not to go after the super big name guys, but to go after some calculated moves of players, not just on these 1-year short-term deals, but multiple years, experienced players who fill specific needs, a first baseman, a veteran starting pitcher, a couple of relievers, maybe somebody who could share a DH job, something like that. It's not going to cost a fortune. You're not going to be committed to a ton a year. So Christian Walker, I think, is the perfect example of that. Somebody who, by all accounts, is looking for 3 years and $60 to $70 million in that range. That's the kind of player they should be going after, in my opinion. If you don't get him, okay, so be it. But I'd like to hear that they are involved in that. And then the third level, and this would be the really disappointing one, is essentially what they did the last 3 off seasons, which is we're going to spend a bare minimum amount of money. It's all going to be 1-year deals for like $5 million. Guys trying to have bounce back years, guys on the tail ends of their careers, guys who you're acquiring now because you might try to flip them at the trade deadline. They should not be in that position anymore. I think we all agree that to be the case. So the hope would be that's not where they're going to be, but we just don't know yet without the lack of evidence. But here's what I will say, and the reason why I'm still optimistic, at least of them competing at that second level. They have no money invested in this team right now at all, okay? Patrick Corbin's off the books. Steven Strasburg, I know they're still paying him, but that's money that was allocated before, and I'm not really considering that as part of their payroll at this point. Trevor Williams is gone. Kyle Finnegan is gone, as we're going to discuss. By my calculation at the moment, if they fielded an opening day roster right now, it would have a payroll of about $35 million. I can't begin to tell you how low that is. That puts the Athletics to shame. It's like half of what the Athletics might spend, and they might even go higher because they just signed a prominent free agent out of the blue. So if you are just attempting to make up for what you've gotten off the books from last year to the next year, they can spend about $50 million right now and still only have a payroll below $100 million. There's no excuse to not at least do that. And so that's why I want to believe that deep down, unless they've been given the edict that they have to slash payroll by a dramatic amount, they've got to at least come back in sort of where they were last year, which means you can spend the $35 million you paid Patrick Corbin on somebody else or on multiple other people, right?
Well, it comes down to the Lerner ownership group. How in are they? And this remains the big mystery. Is the Lerner group still in, or is the Lerner group basically 1 foot out the door and just waiting for the right opportunity to sell the team? You know, it's incredible when you think about this. April 2022 was when we learned that the Lerners had begun exploring selling the Nationals. We're coming up on 3 years since that news broke, and we know what has happened. The Lerners, in theory, are no longer exploring selling the team, although, as we've discussed, I don't quite buy that. I think if the right offer came, the team would be sold. But the point is, it's been nearly 3 years since that news broke. Mark Lerner, the managing principal owner, has not done a single session with reporters since then. He has barely spoken publicly. The occasional written statement has been issued. He's talked to the Post. But beyond that, you're not hearing from him. You're not hearing from ownership. And I think now more than ever, it would do this team so much good. It would do the fan base so much good to hear from Mark Lerner. Here's where we're at. Here's what we're thinking. You don't have to do some extended ordeal where you speak for 45 minutes, but geez, something. He's become almost like a recluse in terms of not speaking publicly. And all of these people, fans and media, questioning the Lerners' commitment to this team, I get it. You're not hearing from these people. And so you're left to sort of wonder on your own and speculate on your own where this ownership group is at. And the more that we don't hear from the ownership group, the more that it becomes fair to wonder how in truly this ownership group is. And if this ownership group isn't truly in on owning this team, then that's a big time problem. Things are changing in the National League. The Dodgers spend massively. The Mets now spend massively. Whether it works for the Mets, we'll see, but it's sure as heck working for the Dodgers. If you have ownership that is 1 foot in, 1 foot out, good luck having sustained success at this point. You could get away with that maybe 15, 20 years ago. I don't know that you can do that now with the kind of money that is bandied about this sport. The money keeps going up and up. And if you are not going to have ownership that is willing to swim in those waters, especially remember with the Nats as a big market club, a top 10 media market club, Washington, D.C. is a top 10 media market, that's a problem. And I think that that's a big part of this frustration from Nationals fans. Now, the Lerners did spend on players when the Nats were good, 12 through 19, and the ownership deserves credit for that. But that was a different time. There are people who will tell you that was a different moment for the Lerners as a family, financially speaking. And so things have changed. We're in sort of a new phase here. And where is this ownership group at in this new phase? And until we hear from the group or we get concrete evidence of the group being all in, I think it's more than fair to wonder whether this ownership group is all in.
Well, it would be great to hear from them, of course, but I'll say this, actions speak louder than words. And if you're not going to speak, then do things with your actions that show how in you are. Go sign a prominent free agent to a multi-year deal that helps fill these holes, that puts a better team out there. So yes, I'd love to hear them speak, but even more than that, I'd love to see them do the kind of things that suggest they are seriously back in the game and trying to win. And if the ultimate goal is still to try to get a better offer to ultimately sell the team, what better way to do that than to put a better product out there that makes more money and raises the value of the franchise? I don't know what else is really in the works to happen right now that would change somebody's mind on how much they think the team is worth to put in a higher bid on that. So I think we're at a stage now where it boils down to a better product, more success, more revenue, more fans, you name it, that increases the profile and the value of the team. So I would like to see that. But I've raised this point, I think, with you before. I think it's worth bringing up again when you mention how some other teams are approaching this right now. The Dodgers, the Mets, certainly. I think the Phillies are in this category. And I think it's really true right now across baseball. You have a handful of teams and owners in particular who are desperate. They're desperate to win a World Series. In a lot of cases, either because they've never won one before, or it's been a long time since they won one before, or there's some pressure on them to do things they haven't done because they've gotten close and haven't gotten over the hump. The Dodgers, I think, were in that boat until they won it last year. I think the Yankees are in that boat. The Mets clearly are in that boat. The Phillies, I think the Padres have treated it that way. I think a team like the Red Sox should be in that boat. The Nationals used to be a desperate franchise. From 2012 to 2019, they desperately wanted to win and to win a World Series for Ted Lerner, I think, and for the city of Washington. And they would do whatever it took to try to build a team that could do that. And as soon as they won it, that desperation is no longer there. Now, there are a lot of reasons why the franchise has gone where it has over the last 5 years since. But as frustrating as it may be to everyone to feel like that was another era when they were contenders and when they won the World Series, it's still only 5 years. And are there that many owners out there who 5 years later would feel that sense of desperation to get back again and do that? And I think that's a little bit of a concern. I don't think Mark Lerner and certainly the family as a whole is not showing the kind of desperation to win right now that they did show last decade.
Well, there is something to be said for spending money to make money. And if you spend money on the team to make it great and you win more, then perhaps you end up making more money in the long run. I mean, again, Washington, D.C. is a top 10 media market. There's no reason that an MLB team in D.C. can't be one of the financial powerhouses in the sport. And there's reason to believe that the team is not operating in that regard. Like I said, we'll see. I mean, it's still relatively early in the offseason. It's just interesting to me from an ownership perspective, because when you think about the Dodgers, and this gets forgotten, the Dodgers under the ownership of Frank McCourt were an absolute mess. The Dodgers get sold to the Guggenheim Group May 2012, and everything changed. Like, if you want to know what is behind this rebirth, this renaissance of the Dodgers over the last decade plus, it was the sale of the Dodgers. It was new ownership. With the New York Mets, now they haven't yet, won a championship under Steve Cohen, right? But the Mets are a totally different team financially since Steve Cohen bought the team in November 2020. The Wilpons used the Bernie Madoff scandal as like this perpetual reason to never spend on the Mets, right? The New York Mets, right? New York City, the number one media market in this country. Everything has changed for the Mets with new ownership. And I just wonder sometimes if it's not going to be until the Nats get new ownership that things truly change. We'll see. I think this offseason, as we have been discussing, it's a big test of where this ownership group is at. Nobody's asking the Lerners to be reckless in spending. Nobody's asking the Lerners to go bonkers, but it is time to spend. When your president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Rizzo goes on MLB Network and basically says it's time for us to do stuff, I think that's telling. That was almost like a cry for help from Rizzo on Tuesday afternoon, him saying that on national television.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. And I think he has walked a tight rope here since the end of last season when it comes and the few times that the subject has come up and he's had the opportunity to discuss it. I think he's been careful not to say anything completely committal to it in case it doesn't happen. But I think he has voiced enough that you can read between the lines and sense where he's going with this and what he believes is the right thing to do. We talked about this last winter, I remember at the winter meetings. Was that the time to get back in the game again? And I was hearing from people with the team that there was a general consensus of one more year, wait one more year. By the end of 2024, a lot of the prospects are going to have reached the big leagues. You're going to have a much better sense of what you do have in place and what you don't have either in place or coming up sometime soon. And that should provide a more of a focus on now what to attack the following offseason. Well, here we are. It's time. And I think you and I would agree, like, they don't need a ton. You need your young players to develop and become the stars that they're supposed to be. But you can really count on one hand what it is that they need right now to supplement what they already have in place. They need a power hitter, preferably a first baseman. They need a veteran starting pitcher. They need a couple of relievers, maybe one more bat, again, that ties in the DH. Maybe third base is somehow involved in that. But in the grand scheme of things, we're not talking about, oh my God, they need everything in the world to try to get back to being a good team again. If the young guys continue to progress the way you hope they do, you're talking about extra pieces that now fill in the gaps and supplement that. And there's reason to think they could be a contending team in 2025 if they do those things.
Yeah. Whether they are good or not next season is going to hinge on James Wood, Dylan Cruz, C.J. Abrams, Brady House, Luis Garcia Jr., etc., being who those guys are supposed to be. And if they are, then the team will be good. And if they're not, then it may not matter what they do this offseason. So I think we all would agree with that. Like, that young nucleus of players is what is going to make or break whether this rebuild ends up working out. Hey, Al Galdi here to tell you about the latest great deal that Window Nation is offering to listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. It is the Window Nation end of year sale, and this is a whopper. 50% off all window styles plus 0% interest for 72 months. Yes, 6 years, and an additional 10% off. Call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Give your home the gift of windows this holiday season. 50% off all Window Nation window styles. That includes double hung, bays, bows, picture windows, everything, plus 0% interest for 72 months. That's 6 years, and you get an additional 10% off. 866-90NATION or windownation.com. Window Nation windows are the best upgrade, the value, look, and feel of your home this holiday season. 866-90NATION or windownation.com. That's 866-90NATION or windownation.com. And tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast.
If you're like me, you're looking for an edge for sports betting. So when I heard Masterclass had a new class on beating the odds, taught by the pros who have made millions, I had to check it out. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. Novice bettors are at a huge disadvantage, with most losing early and fast. Before, the knowledge needed to level up was hard to come by. Now there's Masterclass, and the classes really make a difference. 88% of members feel that Masterclass has made a positive impact on their lives. I use it, and you should too. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. And Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/Blue Wire for their current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/Blue Wire. That's masterclass.com/Blue Wire. And remember, all sports betting involves risk, and you're responsible for complying with all sports betting laws in your jurisdiction.
Hey, it's Austin James. Yes, I'm living with diabetes, but it doesn't have to define me. Thanks to the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor, I get real-time glucose readings throughout the day. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor is small and easy to wear, giving me the freedom to focus on my life as a parent and a musician. Now this is progress. You can get a free sensor at freestylelibre.us.
Offer available for people who qualify. Visit myfreestyle.us to see all terms and conditions. Certain exclusions apply. Data on file, Abbott Diabetes Care. For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Check of the runners. Kicks and delivers. Swing and a fly ball to deep left. Way back. Going. It is gone. Goodbye. Bang. Zoom goes James Wood with his second major league home run. It is an opposite field 3-run blast.
So we have this Juan Soto news, and of course it ignites this relitigating of everything that went down with him and the Nats, and I don't think we're here to go through all of that again. But I try to look at it like this. Okay, what are the lessons here from a Nationals perspective, right? And we could say, well, they should have been more aggressive in trying to sign him in 2022. But I think the real lesson is if you did want to keep him, you needed to be super aggressive before then. It's very tricky with signing these stud young players to long-term extensions, but the way to do it is you got to approach it before it's obvious that you should sign the guy to an extension. It's a very tricky thing to do. And maybe with Soto, he never would have signed anything because Scott Boras is his agent. But the point is, the time to sign Soto really was not, 2022, and it was screaming obvious to everyone he was a great player. The time to do it was probably multiple years before then, to whatever degree he was open to it. And so let's spin this forward. James Wood, right now, instead of spending money on a veteran player, what if the Nats this offseason went to James Wood and said, let's talk mega money contract extension that buys out your arbitration years, but for us, buys out some of your free agent years? Do you think that that would be a prudent thing to do? Do you think that that is all a realistic possibility?
I think it's worth inquiring. I don't think there's any harm in at least exploring that possibility. The one good thing, if you want to call it that, with him is he's not a Scott Boras client. So, Dylan Cruz is, Mackenzie Gore is, CJ Abrams is not. So maybe you think deep down there's a chance. Now, we were talking about Abrams last winter as maybe it's something that could happen. We never really heard if they approached that or if anything came of that. Obviously, they didn't sign him to any extension. James, you're talking about 3 months into his career. But I don't think there's any harm in approaching it. If you truly believe this guy is going to be the stud that everybody has always said he's going to be, and we saw some pretty good evidence of it in those 3 months. Not perfect, but boy, we know he hits the ball really hard. He hits for power to all fields. The defense got better towards the end. He's a physical specimen, and he's still so young. Yeah, absolutely, it's something that they should attempt to do. But I think they also have to be realistic and understand why it's really hard and unlikely in most cases. And unfortunately, I think the more that Soto deals like that happen and other players get the kind of money they're getting in free agency, it's kind of ridiculous what some of these top contracts are right now. These players are smart enough to see that and recognize that in almost every case, they make out better if they wait and play the game and go through arbitration and become free agents. And especially if you have an agent who studies that stuff closely, like Scott Boras does, it makes it almost an impossible task. But if you have the opportunity, yes, of course, you approach James Wood right now and say, here's a thought. How about we lock you up right now for $400 million for X number of years? Any chance you might go for that? Sure. I think there's no harm in trying to do that. But I think the other part of the equation is this. And we've brought this up when it came to Soto as well. Yes, it's about the money deep down, but it's also about showing these players that you are committed to having a team that consistently has a chance to win, that has a fan base that's engaged and comes to all the games, that this is a first-class organization that you want to commit to before you have to. And the best way to do that is to win. And the best way to win is to spend money on other players as well. So as we talked about so many times with the Soto case, I do think part of the equation there was when they tried to get him to sign that deal, when they offered him $440 million, they were halfway through a 100-loss season with no farm system. So if you're Juan Soto, even if the money seemed appealing, you don't know where the franchise is headed, and the grass may be greener somewhere else, and it turned out that it probably was somewhere else. So not to say that James Wood wouldn't look at the future of the Nationals and be encouraged by it, but it's not just the money. You got to show him we have the ability to put together a team that's going to win for a long time with you as a centerpiece.
For sure. And I think there is some chicken and egg here, because I think if you make them a compelling offer, then that in and of itself can serve as evidence that you're serious about winning and are trying to establish a winning culture. I just think, with all this Soto talk, it's like, okay, instead of trying to figure out what happened, let's look at what are the lessons from this and how can they be applied moving forward. And to me, one of the lessons is 2022 was not the time to get super serious about signing them like 2019 was. It's interesting looking back, and this is all hindsight, I'll grant you that. But in hindsight, what should have happened after the Nats won the 2019 World Series was Steven Strasburg, see you later. Anthony Rendon, see you later. Juan, come over here. Let's talk contract extension. That's what should have happened. And again, it's easy to say that now, but let's learn from that. And let's apply it moving forward. Like if I'm Mike Rizzo, if I'm Mark Lerner, if I'm the rest of that ownership group, that's what I'm thinking here. What can we take from what just happened here? No one feels good about the Juan Soto situation. How could you? He's a generational player. He's a future Hall of Famer, and he's going to be playing for a division rival for years to come. So what happened here, and why did it happen? And I think that, okay, now you have a guy in James Wood who maybe is Soto-esque, right? Maybe he's better than Soto. Who knows? Now is the time to start talking extension with him. Not 2 years from now, when it's obvious to everyone that Wood is a great player. And there's risk in doing something like this. That's true, because we're not certain yet about James Wood, but that's the whole point. He's not going to sign an extension more likely than not when it's certain what he is as a player, if he's great. So now would be the time to do that. So I think that that's something to think about. So in terms of who the Nats could be signing in free agency, so we've talked about Christian Walker. Pete Alonso has come up. He's still out there as we tape this. It's interesting to me with what's happening with starting pitching. Not that MLB Trade Rumors is the Bible, but MLB Trade Rumors puts out projected contracts for free agents. So many of the starting pitching contracts so far in free agency have vastly surpassed the projections on MLB Trade Rumors. Like Blake Snell, he got $182 million, was projected to get $160. Max Fried, He got $218 million, was projected to get $156. Nate Eovaldi, he got $75 million, was projected to get $44. Luis Severino, he got $67 million, was projected to get $51. On and on we can go. We know that starting pitching is costly, but this offseason, it appears to be especially costly. You wonder what Corbin Burnes is going to end up getting. And when you take that cost and then you marry to it the extreme rate of injury for starting pitchers, boy, I wonder what Mike Rizzo is thinking about what is the right way to spend on starting pitching in this free agent market.
Yeah, and I think what's happened so far probably is scaring them off more than it's encouraging them. And I think that's both Rizzo, but it could even be at the ownership level too. We know the last big-time contract they signed, they regret it now because of what happened injury-wise with Steven Strasburg. And you can't tell me that there aren't still some scars from that. And not saying that should apply, that you shouldn't dust yourself off and say, let's go at it again. Let's go find the next one who is actually going to be worth it. But I would not be shocked at all if there is a whole lot of buyer's remorse there with him and with Corbin that has left the ownership less inclined to spend big on a pitcher. I think a position player is a different story. It's also the years. I mean, Max Fried got 8 years from the Yankees. Who do you give an 8-year pitching contract to? That is dangerous stuff. And, we'll see. But what's happened in that market kind of leads me to believe that whatever the Nats do pitching wise is going to be shorter term. I think they're willing to give big bucks, but on a short term, 2-3 year deal, tops maybe even a 1 or 2 year deal for someone who could just provide some leadership and innings that you need. So I don't think we're talking about an ace level guy. Burnes is obviously the big one out there. Maybe they go that way, but I could see why they'd be scared off by that. Now, the other thing, and we had talked about the possibility, could you get pitching through a trade? Well, the biggest trade chip out there was Garrett Crochet, and he just went to the Red Sox for 4 top prospects. So the price was very high on that. And again, I don't know if that's a neighborhood that Mike Rizzo was willing to go shopping in either. So it does create a challenge from a pitching perspective. We'll see. There's still a lot of guys out there. Maybe the strategy now is you wait it out and go for that second tier, third tier as the big names start to fall. And maybe there's less demand for those and you can get somebody on a more affordable deal, a shorter term deal. I'd be surprised, though, if they really got in on these big time, long-term contracts on free agent pitchers that we know historically, other than Max Scherzer, they hardly ever work out to be worth it.
Very true. It's funny. I've looked at Corbin Burnes. There are parallels between him and Max from a standpoint of same age in free agency. Burnes, like Scherzer, really good. Burnes, like Scherzer, really durable. And so you say if someone is going to go against the grain, it'll be someone like that who doesn't have much of an injury history. Scherzer didn't. Burnes does not. But of course, who feels great about giving an 8-year, $200, $300 million contract to a pitcher going into his 30s as Burnes is? Like, nobody feels good about that at this point. And I don't blame any team for not doing that at this point. I mean, a team like the Yankees that gives Fried a contract like that, when you have those kind of financial resources, you can do that. And if the contract doesn't work out, you can move on. And that's the thing with these big market teams with free spending ownership. It's not just that they can sign these guys. It's that they can sign these guys. And if the contracts don't work out, the contracts don't cripple those teams moving forward. They just kind of write it off and they move on to the next adventure in free agency. With most other teams, you sign a mega money contract that doesn't work out, that wrecks you financially for multiple years. And that's obviously a big time difference.
And that's what happened to the Nationals with Strasburg and Corbin. You could say, hey, didn't work out. Well, forget it. Move on, sign somebody else. That's not their approach to these things. That was money that was sunk, and they didn't feel like they could spend it elsewhere. Hopefully now that those are off the books, you feel like they're in a better position to go about it.
Hey Nats fans, after the exciting Nats game, have a listen to some relaxing solo piano music to unwind and help you go to sleep. I'm Tim Newmark, the composer of the Nats Chat theme song, and you can find my latest music on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, and anywhere you stream music. The song you're hearing now is called Improv in A-flat major, The End of the Road.
This episode is brought to you by Disney Plus. game on, because ESPN Plus content is available on Disney Plus. You can watch your favorites from Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus together like never before. With ESPN Plus, unwrap a full day of NBA action on Christmas Day. Tip off the festivities with the Spurs and Knicks, followed by the Mavs and Timberwolves. Then a clash between the Lakers and Warriors, followed by the 76ers and Celtics. And finally, the Nuggets face off against the Suns, all streaming December 25th. Then with Hulu, watch the terrifying sci-fi thriller Alien Romulus, where a group of young space colonizers come face to face with the ultimate horror. And on Disney Plus, follow the adventures of 4 kids across the galaxy as they meet unlikely allies and enemies in Star Wars Skeleton Crew, starring Jude Law. All of these and more now streaming and available with a bundle subscription. Visit disneyplus.com for details. Terms apply.
Craven, the hunter, who uses all the methods of the animals.
This Thursday, witness the making of a new Marvel villain.
Once you're on his list, there's only one way off.
Aaron Taylor Johnson is Craven the Hunter. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
34,000 plus all around Nationals Park on their feet. Runners lead first and second, 2 out. Finnegan sets the kick and the pitch. Swinging a fly ball to right field. Dylan Cruz moving back, shy of the track, backpedaling there. He makes the catch. And bang, Zuma, Curly W's in the books.
So as we are talking pitching, we get to this Kyle Finnegan situation. And I think this is another one of these things that you look at and you say, okay, what really happened here? November 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern was the deadline by which MLB teams needed to tender contracts to arbitration-eligible players, or else those players became free agents. The Nats that night announced having tendered contracts to all unsigned 40-man roster players, with the exceptions of 2 relievers, Kyle Finnegan and Tanner Rainey. Now, Rainey, we get. Tommy John surgery, August 2022, was never the same after that. But the Nats' decision to non-tender Finnegan really was nothing short of shocking. I mean, we talked Kyle Finnegan a lot this past season. Mike Rizzo not trading Finnegan in the lead up to the 2024 MLB trade deadline this past July 30th was a big deal, a big topic. There were, I thought, many reasons to trade Finnegan. Rizzo did not trade Finnegan. And so the last thing anyone expected was for the Nats to non-tender Finnegan, and yet the Nats non-tendered Finnegan. I texted you the morning after because to me, there was a big question off this, and there remains a big question off this. Was the Nats non-tendering Kyle Finnegan a Mike Rizzo decision? I.e., from a baseball perspective, he felt it was unwise to tender Finnegan, and he was essentially admitting that he screwed up in not trading Finnegan. Or was the Nats non-tendering Finnegan because Mike Rizzo does not have the budget to do something like tender Kyle Finnegan? The tender number or the arbitration money for Finnegan was projected to be around like $8 million, give or take. That's not massive money, but that's not nothing money. And especially if you're on a budget, that is significant. And so this to me is the question. What's behind the Nats non-tendering Finnegan? Was this a Rizzo call, or was this, in essence, an ownership call? Who ordered the code red on Kyle Finnegan? That's the question.
Well, can you handle the truth? That's the question here. Because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you may not want to know the answer to this one, everyone. I don't know the definitive answer to this one. I think it is maybe the most important question of the offseason to date, because their response to this tells us what's really going on, whether they are in a position to spend money on players this winter, whether payroll is going to go up or even hold steady, or whether, God forbid, they're slashing it even more and going down. And until we see how they proceed with this, we don't really know. I think it boils down to this. There's basically 2 reasons why they may have made this move. If the first reason is, or one of the reasons is, because they feel like they can spend that money on a better reliever, then that's a baseball decision. And as surprising as it was, as much as some people might question the merits of that, that at least has some baseball logic in it. And you could say, okay, they could come out of this better if they feel like, you know what, Kyle Finnegan, good reliever, but not really a frontline closer, not worth $8.5 million. Let's spend that money, or maybe even more, on a more established, more surefire ninth inning guy. Okay. Or is the reason they made that move because they don't intend to spend that money on any reliever or maybe anyone else? And if that's true, that is hugely concerning because that speaks to a larger issue of ownership restricting Rizzo from making the kind of transactions that he thinks he needs to make this team better. Again, we don't know the answer until we see what the next move is. So I've tried to keep an open mind on that one without seeing. You got a few hints at the winter meetings from Rizzo and Davey, essentially saying that they felt like that was too much to spend on Finnegan, given who he is as a pitcher. They loved the guy. He did a very good job for them, but we've discussed where the flaws are and the concern that maybe it could come apart for him at some point and that this run that he had been on, might fall apart a year from now. So there's that. They mentioned having a lot of promising young arms in their bullpen who they think could ascend into larger roles. Maybe one of them, maybe Jose Ferrer is a closer of the future, but boy, they don't have anybody at the moment who has any track record that you trust to take on that kind of role. And they're not paying any of these guys any money. So I really want to believe that they are going to spend some money on some established relievers. And truthfully, they need more than one. Even if they kept Finnegan, I think they needed at least one setup man, maybe two. You look back to what they had last year, it was Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, and Dylan Floro. That was the trio that was so effective. They traded Harvey and Floro, they kept Finnegan, and now they dump Finnegan. That's three spots ultimately you've got to fill. And I just don't know that internally they have the options that make you feel good about replacing them.
Well, and from an asset management perspective, what the Nats did with Hunter Harvey was masterful. Waiver claim, rehabbed him, got good production out of him, and then flipped him for a nice prospect from the Kansas City Royals. From an asset management perspective, what happened here with Kyle Finnegan was wretched, where this guy was at peak value, older reliever, peripherals screamed that his productive season was not as good as it appeared to be. He basically fell off a cliff after that trade deadline. By the way, was barely used after that trade deadline. Remember we talked about that, how the Nats would go like days without using Finnegan, and then they don't even tender him. So I'm not sure which is worse, Rizzo being handcuffed or this actually being a Rizzo call, them non-tendering him. But it ends up not looking very good from a Nats perspective. But I think it does very much matter. What was the truth here? What was the driving factor here behind the Nats non-tendering Finnegan? While we are talking Nats relievers, there is a new Nationals reliever in the organization. We on Wednesday afternoon had the 2024 MLB Rule 5 draft, and the Nats once again made a selection in the major league phase of that draft. We've gotten used to this here in recent years. So the Nats taking reliever Evan Reifert from the Tampa Bay Rays organization. He in the 2024 season, what was his age 25 season, pitched for the Rays AA affiliate, the Montgomery Biscuits. 35 games, 41 in a third innings, ERA of 196, whip 0.919, strikeouts per 9 innings, 14.2. Impressive numbers for sure. He is an older prospect, age 25 season in AA. You are an older prospect. And of course, we've danced this dance the last few years. Thaddeus Ward a few years ago, he's already gone from the organization. Nasim Nunez this past season, he actually showed some promise. Maybe there's something there. But what do you make of the Nats taking Evan Reifert in this Rule 5 draft?
So I was kind of deep down hoping that they wouldn't take anyone in this draft because I think that would be a sign of maybe where they think they're headed. Remember, they went more than a decade without taking anybody in the Rule 5 draft, and that coincided with the years that they were trying to win for the most part. Now, all of a sudden, you're in a rebuild mode, and you go ahead and take part in this thing and see how it goes. I think we can definitively say now that Thad Ward was not worth it. The jury's still out on Nasim Nunez, although there was some legitimate stuff to be encouraged by there. So I was hoping that maybe they wouldn't go this route because, as we know, it often involves wasting a roster spot and stashing somebody in the big leagues who probably doesn't deserve to be there and then is kept there for the whole year for the purposes of retaining them beyond that season. Now, having said that, if you were going to do this again, I think this is the right kind of player to use a Rule 5 pick on. We just talked about the bullpen. There are very few sure things they have down there right now. They're going to need to acquire multiple relievers regardless. So there's a spot there for someone. So number one, I think that's a position that's worth doing it. The numbers last season at Double-A were really, really good. And it's not just the ERA and the whip, it's the strikeouts. Big-time strikeout numbers, which he has posted throughout his minor league career. Now, he had some injuries in the past, a shoulder issue that kept him out most of 2023. But he was healthy, it appears, last season and put up some really good numbers there. Apparently has a wipeout slider. That's his big pitch. So it does strike me as someone who could, in theory, step in and have some success in the big leagues, and somebody who could, stick around and have a chance of making it. But here's what I want to see now that they've done this. I want them to actually give him a chance to pitch. Don't sit him in the bullpen for weeks at a time. Don't only use him when you're down 9 runs. Ease him in, of course, but I want to see him in some kind of situations of consequence and find out, does he have the goods or not? If it becomes clear that he doesn't, be willing to cut bait and move on. Send him back to the Rays, or you offer him back. Maybe they don't take him. He clears waivers, whatever that may be. Don't feel like you have to keep a guy on your roster the entire season if it's clear that he's not helping you. So if they take that approach, I think it's a worthy risk. You go into this knowing that most of these guys don't ultimately make it, but the kind of player that he is, the kind of pitcher that he is, what their needs are, I understand taking the gamble on it, but I want them to be more definitive about it this time and not just hold on to them because they think they have to.
Yeah, consistently taking players in Rule 5 drafts is the behavior of a rebuilding team. And, the Nats, I think it has made sense them taking these guys in Rule 5 drafts, but at some point you'd like it to stop, because that, I think, will be one of those little things that's not so little. It'll be a sign that things are in fact getting better. And we're not quite there yet. It is so funny. I thought that last Nats season would give us some clarity on whether the rebuild is working. We got a little more, but not nearly enough. Like, this still is very much a glass half full, glass half empty scenario. And you can make the argument that the rebuild is going well. You can make the argument that the rebuild is not going so well. You can be excited right now. The Nats have the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 draft. They're going to add someone, maybe Ethan Holiday, to this nucleus of James Wood and Dylan Cruz and CJ Abrams and Brady House and Luis Garcia Jr. And that's reason to be excited. But there also is the spending thing that we've talked about. There's the fact that, oh, by the way, the actual winning on the field still has not happened. And that's concerning. And, I think about a guy who we just talked about, Kyle Finnegan. And I feel like this captures the state of the Nats perfectly. The Nats last season had 2 All-Stars. That by itself, you would say, well, that's pretty good. The rebuilding team has 2 All-Stars. And yet what happened with those 2 All-Stars as the season and the year went on? CJ Abrams on September 21st got shockingly demoted to AAA in a disciplinary measure. And Kyle Finnegan got non-tendered. And I think that is the perfect microcosm for the Nats. Like, you could argue, well, they had good seasons. They were all-stars. Abrams put up some good numbers, ultimately, even with the up-and-down nature of his season. And yet, by the end of this season, did you feel great about either guy? You really didn't. And I feel like that's kind of where we are with the Nats right now. It's hard to know sometimes how to feel about what's happening here. And so you see, I think, a lot of mixed opinion on where the Nats are at. Social media is not the greatest barometer for this stuff, but I see it on X all the time. People bullish on the Nats and people very bearish on the Nats, and I get each sentiment. It's not crystal clear right now how things are going, how you should feel. You hope for the best. I think this thing still could very much work out. This team could be really good this coming season, but that's far from a certainty.
To use a term that I know you like as a stats guy, it's high variance. The range of where this could go is still so wide. It could go really well. It could go really poorly. It could go somewhere in between. And I think the reason for that is that there are so few sure things, if any, both on the roster and in how they're approaching things from a front office standpoint and ownership standpoint. Right now, gun to your head, who are you most confident in is going to be a really good player in 2025? You want to believe James Wood, Dylan Cruz, yeah, but we don't really know. There's not enough body of evidence there. You want to believe C.J. Abrams is going to come back, be really good, but we don't truly know that. You want to believe Mackenzie Gore and Jake Irvin are going to build off what they did last year, but again, you don't know that for certain. And then on a broader level, you want to believe that Mike Rizzo is going to be able to do what he's done in the past and continue to build this into being a winning team, but we don't know that yet, and we don't know that ownership is going to do its part as well. There's so much uncertainty. It's really a strange position, I feel like, to be in. And I feel like we've been in this holding pattern for a while now. Everybody wants this rebuilding process to move into that next stage. It's the stage when you're not really calling it a rebuild anymore, but you're finally seeing the benefits of all the suffering that you went through. And it's entirely possible that we get that in the next calendar year. But we don't really know that, and there's no way to say with certainty that will happen because there are so many unanswered questions still as we sit here in the middle of December.
You tell us what you think. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We will be back with you as Nationals news developments warrant. Hopefully, we get one of those developments sooner rather than later, but we'll see. Until then, we want to thank everyone for listening. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. Happy holidays, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.